Friends, today we're going to cover an interesting topic. It's called driving profitability through your RIA's governing documents. Driving profitability. Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever thought about the documents that you have governing your company can actually make you more profitable? Now, in light of our series that we're in, the 8-figure exit, do you realize that your governing documents can also help you prepare for the 8-figure exit? We're going to have a blast today in today's episode. Now, look, I'm not an attorney, and what we're going to cover today is not legal advice. Rather, it is knowledge that I have gleaned from almost 30 years as a business owner. I have spoken with too many attorneys in my life. I have dealt with attorneys too many times in my life. I have worked with countless HR directors, countless compliance officers, and what I'm going to share with you is the sum of the information that I have learned in an applicable manner. So first of all, what are the governing documents of your registered investment advisor? Now, again, if you're not a financial advisor and you're a business owner, the same is true for you. You have governing documents. They may not be the exact same things we're going to cover today. Perhaps they should be, but nonetheless, you will have governing documents. So the content we're going to cover today is directly applicable to you and your business. But for the financial advisor, what are the governing documents of your business? Well, first and foremost, you're going to have an employee handbook. You're going to have an employee handbook. The employee handbook helps new employees learn about the company's rules, policies, cultures, values, and it protects the company from legal issues. Everybody should have an employee handbook. It lets your team know what's expected of them and how you're going to behave. So that's one of the first governing documents we have. We also, in the finance world, have a compliance manual. And it dictates the processes, the policies, the procedures that the RIA has to follow to be in compliance with the regulations, with the laws that the financial industry needs to abide by. Addition to the compliance manual is you may have a company policy manual. It's different than the employee handbook. Remember, the employee handbook tells the employee what's expected of them, but the company policy manual may tell you how to do certain aspects within the company. It's going to outlay the procedures that are expected of you. For example, you may need to open up a new account. There should be a policy manual in place that tells you the steps that are needed to open up a new account. Now, in the financial space, we're required to have a business continuity plan. What happens if the world as we know it comes to an end tomorrow? I say that tongue in cheek a little bit, but what happens if you perhaps are dealing with a tornado or a hurricane or a fire or a flood, natural disasters, or maybe we're dealing with just some terrorist type of things? How do we continue the business? How do we continue to serve our customers who need us, who need to have access to us? During COVID, I watched the business continuity planning of so many types of business spring into effect. And perhaps you should have a business continuity plan. And then you should also have an operating agreement. How is the company going to operate? Perhaps you're a partnership or you're an S corp with multiple shareholders. How is the business itself going to be governed? This is how an operating agreement works. Now, friends, there's a ton of other types of legal documents you may have, but for the most part, these are the most common that we'll see in the financial firm. So it begs the question, how do these documents, how in the world does a document written by an attorney impact our 8-figure exit? First of all, proper written documentation will increase profitability. You see, it sets clear expectations and it will drive efficiency. The employee handbook, for example, should be the first place employees go when they have a question about how to handle a particular procedure. By you having something written down, it can save the employee from calling another employee who happens perhaps the wrong one and the chit-chat that could happen. And it prevents the employee from feeling stuck without having any direction on what to do next. So what an employee handbook or any of these other documents can do is it can drive profitability through efficiency. Number 2 is it creates a clear chain of command, which again drives efficiency, and efficiency leads to profitability. Your policies and procedures should lay out exactly who the employees should direct their questions toward. Now, I've been in many companies to where there is not a clear organizational structure, a clear chain of command. And therefore, whenever someone has a question, they call a meeting with 5 or 6 or 7 other employees at the company who probably not all of them need to be there. Or let's say that somebody had a problem and they were scared to address it with their direct supervisor. How do they handle the problem? By having a clear chain of command, and governing documents, you create efficiency. And again, efficiency leads to profitability. The other thing that the documentation demands is it demands compliance. Now, hear me out. I'm not talking about compliance in terms of the regulatory bodies. I'm talking about compliance in terms of following the governing documents. So if you, the business owner, are seeking an 8-figure exit, then you're going to outline the do's and don'ts of your business. What that's going to do is it's going to hold you, the business owner, accountable to follow your own directions. You see, we, the business owners, often cause more inefficiency than any employee in our company. Why? Because we often have shiny object syndrome. We see something over here and we want to chase after it. And by chasing after it, we cause our team to lose momentum to try to follow us through the fray, and we end up losing efficiency, and therefore we end up losing profitability. By having these various things, we can drive efficiency, and efficiency leads to profitability. Another thing that the documents will do is it helps us with risk mitigation. I mentioned this earlier, but by having the proper documents could preempt a legal action. It helps protect you. It shows the employees or your customers or the regulators exactly how you're going to operate your company. And as long as you follow the operations, many times we are protected. So it could help with legal action. And should you find yourself in the event of legal action, it could help you with resolution to that action. Now, how does it impact? How do these governing documents impact our 8-figure exit? Number one is it's going to drive up your intrinsic value. Your intrinsic value is the multiplier. It could cause your multiplier to increase. Just think about it. Let's say that you're the investor and you're looking at buying your business. If you, the investor, are willing to put up millions of your dollars, 8 figures of your dollars to buy this business, wouldn't you want to know that there were foundational documents in place that everybody understood and they were following the rules? Wouldn't you like to know that the compliance manual was up to date and that by following the compliance manual, there should be very minimum type of compliance risk within the company? See, by having the documents in place, you can increase your intrinsic value, which is the multiple. It's going to help drive your multiple. The other thing it's going to do is through efficiency and profitability, as we just discussed, it could drive your margin higher. The higher the margin, the higher the multiple. The higher the margin, the higher the sell value. So by having the proper documentation in place, it can increase your potential for an 8-figure exit. So it begs the question now, how do we gain efficiency in our business, in our RIA, by enforcing or reinforcing key policies and procedures? Well, first of all, who is the person responsible for enforcing or reinforcing the key policies and procedures? You are, or your executives are. If you're the owner, then it's you. If you have C-suite employees, then they're the ones who are to drive policy conformity. How do you do it? It's a continual process. Remember the old saying, more things are caught than taught? You see, when you hire somebody, for example, you've got to set the expectations properly. Your expectations should be detailed and be encompassing of all the documents that you deal with that govern your overall company. There was a survey done in 2020 by Expert HR that says 60% of employees avoid reading the employee handbook. Think about that. 60% of your employees have never read the employee handbook. So that goes in perfect lockstep with the study that said 50% of employers find it difficult to train employees and managers in enforcing the handbook. Why is it difficult? Because they've never read it. You see, setting expectations for your employees is vitally important. Without set expectations, employees can be left to wonder where their impact lies and therefore fall behind. And that's a direct quote from Luann Tierney, who was the chief marketing officer at BetterWorks. And BetterWorks, if you're familiar with them, they're a workplace empowerment and performance company. They're there to drive performance in companies. So as Luann says, we should set expectation, and it's important to do it from the very beginning. Think about this. You have a job description for your employees. Have you compared and linked the job description to the employee handbook or to the company documents? There's an example I read by Jeff Smith, who is the director of the, quote, Best Self Academy. That's the name of the business. And he said, and I quote here, having an accurate job description can act as the foundation for great relationships between a manager and a direct report. Many job descriptions list dozens of responsibilities and required skills instead of focusing on what the role will actually entail. See, once someone joins the company, their job description includes actionable items around what's expected during their first 30, 60, 90, and 1 year. It's a simple technique. Think about that, friends. If you're trying to enforce or you're trying to reinforce compliance with your manuals, then it begins at the very beginning when you hire somebody and setting the expectations properly. But what happens if you didn't do that? What happens if you didn't set the expectations properly? Well, we've all been there. We have employee turnover, which is very costly. Let me challenge you, though. Setting the expectations is not just when you hire somebody. It's during the everyday mundane tasks that we as business owners and our employees do day in, day out. Again, Jeff Smith went on to say, values also help employees have a clear understanding of what they should be focused on and how it contributes to the company's overall strategy, helping open the door for more transparent communication and motivations for success. So when we hire somebody, what's some strategies to help them read our documents? Well, I've seen a few things in my career. I've seen where people do group hosting sessions. I've never been a fan of those. I've seen where you have incentivized reading. In other words, you're going to put small perks in place if you read things. Never been a fan of that. I've seen short quizzes where somebody has in the book, they have to answer quizzes. That's not a bad way. But in modern days, we use technology. You can use technology that will allow someone to read a few chapters, and before they have to answer the question, which forces them to go back and read the material. I love the use of technology. So when you're hiring somebody, you have a great opportunity to enforce the behavior for compliance with your governing documents. And again, the governing documents will drive efficiency, which leads to profitability, which helps drive your multiple, and then therefore we have potentially our 8-figure exit. Now, not only do we have the opportunity at the time of hiring to drive compliance with all of our governing manuals, but every year when we do our annual review meeting with our team, we have a great opportunity at that point to drive compliance, to drive adherence to all of our documents. There's a rule, 2064-7, that is known as the Compliance Program Rule. And it's specifically designed for us as financial advisors. And it states that all SEC registered advisors must have formal policies, procedures, internal controls, and designated responsible persons for the compliance program in their organization. Now, perhaps you knew that or you didn't know that. Nonetheless, it's out there. I was reading something from Advisor Assets. Chris Wynn said, quote, compliance is not just about the rules and regulation, but rather enterprise risk management. There is an inherent intersection between compliance and operations. Effective firms integrate operations and compliance in various ways to enhance internal controls and weave risk management into the routine functions of the firm. See, I grew up in the early days of learning that compliance is my friend. Now, I have several peers inside the financial world that hate compliance. They just like, man, they're against us. They quabosh the sales. They're anti-sales related, or they're just here to make my life more difficult. As a business owner, you can't take that posture. You can't take that posture with the compliance department. You can't take that posture with the HR team in your company. You can't take that posture with the attorneys who help you put together the governing documents. All the different governing documents that we have are there for our protection as business owners to reduce what we know as company-specific risk. In short, each of these governing documents are there for good business. They cause us to pause and say, hey, am I really thinking through this particular process? If so, add it to a manual. If not, remove it and don't think about it any further. You see, by engaging your team in the governing documents, you can instill a culture of regulatory compliance for you and your RIA, but you can also instill a culture of profitability and value. Remember, efficiency leads to profitability. Profitability leads to value creation. So by using these governing documents and referencing them, by saying, hey, I have an employee manual. Here's how it works. I had this opportunity this last week where I was talking with a client and he was asking me a question. It was about a 5-minute long question. And he went through the whole gyration of what he was going to do, hiring this new potential employee and how he's going to structure the potential benefits for this employee, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, what do you think? And what he was asking me for was affirmation of his brilliance at this particular point. And I said, hey, I got one question for you. He said, yeah, what's that? I said, have you looked at your employee handbook? And it got quiet, like crickets quiet on the phone. He's like, no. I said, then why in the world are you talking to me about this particular position if you haven't even referenced your employee handbook? Because half the things you just said are not possible according to your employee handbook. So either you need to go back and modify your employee handbook with your HR director, or you need to adjust your current concept. And he's like, are you kidding me? I just went on for 5 minutes and now you want me to talk about the employee handbook? Yes, because the governing documents matter. He said, Justin, I haven't even looked at those documents. I read some recent research that said that 69% of executives are not confident that their current policies are enough to meet their current or future needs. That's what this particular business owner was saying. He's like, Justin, I haven't read it. And what he was saying was, I don't think it can satisfy where I'm at right now. Now, truth be told, it could, had he read his handbook and refreshed on it. But in his mind, he believed that it wasn't possible. I actually read that only 27% of CCOs, Chief Compliance Officers, believe their compliance function has a change management process in place to identify changes in laws and regulations and incorporate those changes into their regular processes. So out of all the financial firms, only 27% of CCOs believe that they have a process in place to handle regulatory change management. Let's take it a step further. You as a business owner, do you believe that you have the functions and the processes in place whenever HR law changes, compliance law changes with the regulators, state law changes with your type of company, your entity structure? Do you believe you have the change management procedures in place to keep you in compliance and keep your team moving toward the 8-figure exit? Chances are, no, you don't. I read another study that says 63% of organizations say their policy management program has helped reduce legal costs and resolution time on regulatory issues and fines. So the stats say that if we have proper procedures and proper documentation in place, it helps us reduce legal costs and it helps us bring resolution to regulatory issues, etc. But yet we business owners often don't see the importance of these key fundamental documents. We don't think about them in this format. We don't think about them as, hey, these documents are here. These attorney's fees that we pay to set up these documents, these consulting fees that we pay to help us with these handbooks and these manuals, they sure are a waste of time. We're just going to put them on the shelf. Friends, I implore you, please don't. Please don't. You can use the governing documents of your company to drive efficiency. And by driving efficiency, you increase profitability. And by increasing profitability, you impact directly your value, sometimes significantly. So you want an 8-figure exit. Here's the reality. Proper documentation will help with risk management. It helps with employee engagement. It helps with efficiencies, which leads to profitability, and it directly impacts your intrinsic value. So let me ask you the questions, the closing questions. When's the last time you looked at your governing documents? Do you happen to have an employee handbook? Do you happen to have a compliance manual? Do you happen to have a business continuity plan in writing, in place that your team knows about? Do you have a process manual that shows here is how this company is going to operate? Chances are no. Most companies don't have a handbook, a process manual that outlines, here's our secret sauce, and here's how we're going to grow. Let's say you do have some of those. If we were to come into your office as consultants and ask your team, hey, talk to me about your number one frustration with a compliance manual, could they answer the question? If we were coming to look at your processes in your company and we looked in your handbook, would your team be fulfilling the processes as is written in the process manual? Chances are no. So friends, we want an 8-figure exit. It's going to get hard now. If we want an 8-figure exit, let's take a step back. We've already done our strategic planning. Now it's time to look detailed at our legal documents and make sure our legal documents are accurate, up to date, and propelling us to the 8-figure exit. Hey, if you need somebody to help think with you about all this, reach out to us. This is what we do day in and day out. Until next time, friends, y'all go out and make it a great day.